Hey everyone, it's Meg. I'm doing this quick presentation this week and it's going to be asynchronous. So you're going to be listening to my voice for like the next 20-ish minutes. And I'm so sorry. But this is the only way that we could kind of do a presentation without having like an actual Zoom class. And there wasn't enough people interested. So you're going to have to bear with me, especially because there are so many chapters to this and there's so much content that Robinson talks about. That I'm trying to shove it all within like 15-20 minute PowerPoint presentation. So bear with me, but I hope everybody is having fun for the holidays and doing well. So obviously this week we got assigned The Ethics of Care and a Feminist Approach by Fiona Robinson. And she is actually a philosophy professor at a university that I'm already forgetting the name of. Should I have the book right here, that probably would have been helpful. But she is a philosophy professor. She does a lot of other similar topics and books based on the ethics of care and what that means, especially regarding to today's society, politics, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to give a brief overview of the introduction because I felt like it did a really good job of covering like everything that she's going to talk about. Especially, it kind of gets into the specifics of what security studies is, what care ethics is, what how that affects from a feminist perspective. Um, so essentially, I'm going to read, some of these PowerPoints. That way y'all can kind of follow on. But care goes beyond the nuclear and extended family, and it had always been more of a global and ethical issue. She kind of starts by saying that especially the ethics of care. And that's really what it means. She like definitely shows it as more of a socialization aspect more than on an individual level. She kind of goes into that by saying, we consider care in a way where it becomes very difficult to argue that care is more of a private issue. Like it's not like, when you think of like a private entity or private company, you think of all these rules and these expectations. And when it comes to care and the ethicality of care, that privacy just does not exist. As well as, and she makes the point, like all human beings are dependent on some others throughout their lives. So whether, that be children, whether that be, you're going through a rough patch, and you need some help from friends, from financial assistance through, whatever company, organization it may be. Like at one point in your life, as a human being, you're going to be dependent on another person. Like there's just no going about that any other way. So hence why it's not kind of a private issue, as well as where it takes its role in like a global and ethical framework. Her aim pretty much throughout this book is to do more than like simply advance in international political theory of care. This book aims to kind of rethink security and in particular human security through the lens of ethics of care. And we can kind of get into that, what that means. She makes it very clear that she's not offering like a solution to any of this, especially like not trying to give a utopia, which I thought was really interesting because I don't feel like you can really do that. In addition, the books kind of examines the most practical implications of relations for security in a variety of contexts, and that comes in humanitarian intervention, which we're going to talk about later from chapter 4, peace building, health, environment, and women's labor. We're going to get into that in a few other chapters as well. Then she goes on by saying, by foregrounding and prioritizing the consideration of the politics of care, we can recover the potential of human security to focus on attention on innovative strategies for addressing exclusion and oppression that are neither Western-centric nor imperialistic. And we're going to kind of get into that on how she wants to go about addressing exclusion and oppression and kind of the, I guess, quote unquote, solutions that she offers. One of the things that I struggled with, and we can kind of get into this as I get through the presentation, is I feel like she was like high key hypocritical sometimes. Like she would make a comment and then later in the book make another comment that I felt like was just hypocritical to what she had said earlier. Like she would be like, I'm not giving a solution, and then would give a solution. And not that, I'm against that, but it was just, I don't know, it was weird. I had a few other criticisms for her book as well that we can kind of get into later, but this is just the introduction. And she kind of gets into security studies, what that is. Traditionally, we assume security studies is like military versus social security, which it definitely is a little bit of both. But she kind of wants to propose it as a feeling of security is most often the product of feeling attached and included, a feeling that others are here with you to provide support. And my first question kind of is, and you're going to see these in the discussion posts that I sent Professor Buck. He's going to go over these with you. You're going to be able to reply to them. I'm sure he's going to put in all of the like requirements of what he wants, so that way you can get the participation credit for this week. But in regards to like a feeling of security, blah, 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 like what are some detriments, I guess, to this way of thinking? Are there any? If so, how could we go about like fishing those potential issues? So just like overall, did you agree, I guess, with her definition of security and what she wants it to mean? Do you think it makes way for like those two types of security studies that we already mentioned in regard to military and social security? Um, when relations of care are damaged or severed, security is then threatened, which is a lot of where security studies comes into play here. And then she goes on to say human security is widely understood as seeking to safeguard the vital core of human rights from critical, persuasive threats while promoting long term human flourishing. And then I made the note here, especially with regard to flourishing. I know we talked a few weeks about when we read Indigenous economics and this idea of like the human needing to be flourishing or like in a constant or like, an ultimate version of happiness. So that just kind of reminded me of that. And you could get into that yourself. I didn't ask a question regarding that, but I just wanted to make note of it. And then lastly, she kind of gets into the feminist perspective. So obviously, she kind of already laid out what care does, how ethics and care work together. Moreover, what security studies means for her, how that plays into care ethics. And then furthermore, she even goes on to add a feminist perspective to it. And this is kind of, what she aims for the entire book. And we're going to get more into like how these gender-based issues arise and what they have to do with security studies and care of ethics. Um, but she just says a feminist care of ethics perspective on security reveals relations of power that are normally hidden from view and provides a method of analyzing the ways that these relations are connected to people's security. And then we must consider the possible ways in which feminization and integration of caring relations and practices and the isolation of men from these roles contribute to the construction of hegemonic forms of masculinity that are associated with violence. And she just really goes into depth on that feminist perspective. And I could honestly talk about that for like several minutes, but for the sake of time, we're not going to be doing that today. And then furthermore, it definitely plays in obviously to the book and to her aim throughout what she's arguing. All her claims, like the feminist perspective is very influential and like pivotal to the entire book. And so my last question kind of is, I'm going to have two questions per slide that you will go over in your discussion posts. But it was just, how does her aim, if we look at it without a feminist perspective, kind of change? Does it make it worse? What detriments are we looking at? If so, does it make it better? Like, is this beneficial? Obviously, it's beneficial to her argument as a whole because like that's what the entire book is about. But I guess like what differences just do you see with security studies and ethics of care if it's not through a feminist lens? Would kind of be my question. And I think I wrote the question a little bit differently in the discussion post. So you can go ahead and go back and answer that question. But that's pretty much the introduction. You'll see me again in chapter 1.